Well, I think on our end, right, the question really is how long has that application sat there? Because, and we've looked at this kind of reporting prior to the last couple of years, a person could apply and they reasonably expected that you would get back to them in 2 to 3 days. Now, they're expecting within 24 hours.
Mhm.
So if you haven't responded to them within 24 hours and acknowledged that you've received their application and that you're interested, they take that as you're not interested. So I'm moving on and I'm applying for a ton more jobs, which so then if we're coming back 2 or 3 days later and we're reaching out and setting up an interview, they might say yes, but they might have already interviewed with someone else. And so they're
Right.
really just kind of going through the motions with us.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, premium background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or wherever you get your podcast. We're doing something a little different this week. I am attending the HRSouthwest conference here in beautiful Fort Worth, Texas. This is the Texas SHRM State Conference, and they sold out this year at 1,300, I've been corrected already, registrants. And although I'm here attending sessions, I presented 2 sessions, one yesterday on a roundtable on AI and demoed Midjourney, ChatGPT, and Claude AI to some pretty shocked HR professionals who had never played with those tools before. And today I had a regular presentation on the ethics of using AI in the HR realm. But it's the end of the month and the show must go on. So we have to talk about HR news. And joining me today to talk about some hot issues in HR this month is my friend, Rose Ann Garza. Rose Ann is the Chief Human Resources Officer for Kirby Lane Cafe, the iconic restaurant chain based in Austin with 10 restaurants around San Antonio, Austin, and Central Texas. And if you've not gone there for pancakes and you're in Central Texas, make the trip. But she is also the state director for Texas SHRM, the fellowship of 31 SHRM chapters across the state of Texas, all the way from Houston to El Paso and Amarillo down to what's farthest south? Brownsville. So as far south as you can go and still be in Texas. And so those 31 chapters cooperate to create Texas SHRM, which is just how the chapters work together to create programming and support one another and take stuff back to their communities to improve how we do HR across the state of Texas. So, and I'll say Rose Ann is a good friend. So thanks for joining me, Rose Ann.
Happy to be here, Mike. Thank you so much.
So AI is what I've been talking about, and it's still a hot topic. It's been a hot topic all year. Really should have been a hot topic all along because we've been putting AI in applicant tracking systems and comp systems and all kinds of stuff for a long time. But now with ChatGPT and all that, people are getting really, excited about it. It's kind of, people are waking up to it. There was Indeed looked at 55 million job postings and looked at what the job description requirements were and figured out how many of those job position tasks could be outsourced to AI. And they determined that 20% of jobs were at high risk for being eliminated by AI. Is AI going to, is it Skynet? Are we all going to lose our jobs to the robots? What's your take?
Well, I think, it's interesting. I think it depends what industry you're in, what type of job that you do. I think that there is definitely significant risk for certain roles. But when I look at, for example, Kirby Lane, there are things that our team does and that we teach them to do that we could never replace with AI, right? So when I'm talking about taking, care of our guests, making sure that they have what they need, I don't think that that's something that AI is going to, come and take over. And I think that's what we saw in this article from Indeed, right? Which was really that these, truck drivers, taxi drivers, things of that nature, they can't be replaced. So But I do think I use some AI in my job descriptions, and I use it to kind of help me in writing. So I think we're going to see more and more of that in the years to come.
Yeah, the Kirby Lane is unique, because it's a destination restaurant. It's not fast food. I remember the first time we were in, I saw an automated kiosk in a McDonald's when we were in Europe a few years ago. And you didn't have to talk to a single person to get your food, which is good because I don't speak French. But I can see that kind of service industry more and more getting whittled away where it's like self checkout. People still get mad about self checkout, right? But you know, with what the margins are in grocery, it makes sense from their point of view to do that. I don't want to pay 3% more for my bananas, and so I think as wages continue to rise, those retail fast food kind of restaurants, like the other end of the spectrum from y'all, are going to do more of it. But like where you need empathy, where you've got an unhappy customer, which Kirby Lane never has, but a customer with some special request, I'm gluten and granola allergen, and blah blah blah, all this stuff, and they have a question. Then you don't ask that question at McDonald's. If you eat McDonald's, you're going to get what they give you, right? But someplace like Kirby Lane, where you have to talk to a person, you get the opportunity to talk to a person, and they greet you, and you feel good. I love a restaurant where you walk in, even the coffee shop that I go to here locally, you walk in and somebody is within 2 seconds going to say, "Hey, good morning," and that's you're not a robot saying, "Hey, good morning," isn't going to be the same, right? So I can totally see that kind of stuff. Now, I was surprised when it said that drivers and things like that, maybe not in near term, but we're already talking about automated vehicles.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. I mean, even in Austin, which obviously is where I live, and Austin has so much tech. We see that where you've got, especially in the downtown area, robots delivering food rather than the third party delivery services getting in there with their car. And to me, that's incredibly interesting. But again, that's an area that's very concentrated. So that makes sense. If you're talking about a suburb, I don't think that some suburb's going to be going down a country road trying to take someone their pizza. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, and you've got drones, but as soon as the crows in Texas realize there's pizza in that box, the drones are going to be in trouble too. And so I think but we're going to see more and more companies are going to try to figure out ways to replace that personal service. And I think those are the jobs though, whether it's wait staff in a restaurant or a concierge or somebody who's an HR job. I mean, I think a lot of your transactional HR people may be in trouble. We may not. I'm always saying you're not going to lose your job to AI, but you're going to lose your job to somebody using AI.
Right.
And so maybe we've got 3 HR assistants doing transactional processing all day long. Maybe we get technology, whether it's generative AI or something's built into our applicant tracking system, so we can go through our applicants and faster, scheduling interviews faster, all those things. Maybe we get rid of 2 of those 3 assistants.
Well, and that's a thing that we're already seeing with applicant tracking systems, right? Over just the last couple of years, you're seeing where we've moved to QR codes, we've moved to text, interview scheduling. We've moved, already the needle is moving in that direction of how do we streamline this process as much as possible and remove any sort of human interaction or any sort of human error. Right. And so you, as the user on the back end, kind of, saying, here's when we can interview. And then basically this AI is doing all the work for you and you just show up and you do the interviews. So we're already seeing that kind of in our industry where it's being used for applicant tracking. And it's really streamlining the process. It's making it easier and it's freeing up our management to be able to do what we want them to do, which is take care of the guest and take care of the team.
And we hear about candidate experience all the time. And I think there are some people who say, well, the candidate experience is too generalized or commoditized if you automate everything. But quite honestly, unless you're actively going out and finding passive candidates, I'm not sure that custom initial touch or that talking to a human when you're scheduling for an interview matters that much to the candidate. I think maybe the candidate experience is improved if it's all automated, and maybe we'll get to the point where I'll have my bot call your bot, and they will schedule things, and all those things will just happen, and we won't have to have these, all the back as much back and forth. Leave you a voicemail, wait for me to call you back,
Well, and who
and
listens to voicemails? I mean, that's
I
part.
I'm
I
that guy. I'm
well,
sorry. Yeah,
no, I mean, I listen to them too, but I think when I look at our demographic of who's working with us, right? They don't. They're like, you called me? Like, why are
yeah.
why is the phone ringing? What happened? What's wrong? And so I think as we continue to have these generations in the workforce, that they're not used to that human interaction as much because they've really spent so much time with technology and they're so comfortable with it. So it's very natural, I think, for them to kind of think about it in that way. I don't think that it bothers them if it's not a human, but maybe I'm wrong. Again, I'm going to say that a couple times throughout the podcast, but
And we'll
that's
we'll
my
come back
opinion.
and listen to it in 5 years and
Yeah.
find out. But even my own kids, you know, they would much rather I text them. They will not, and unless they need money, they don't answer the phone when I call. They let it go to voicemail. And they'll text me back, "What's up?" And it's annoying, but that's that generation, and they kind of consider it rude to pick up the phone and just call somebody unannounced.
Yeah.
It's like showing up at their front door and knocking on the door. The other thing that they said in this Indeed thing was that those jobs that are highly exposed, that that are just really routine based roles, they're there. But 50, what was it? Generative AI on about half of the jobs can do 50 to 80% of the roles, and I think that's where we're really going to see the efficiencies that people are really looking for achieved. Is what can I do to make my job easier or more efficient so I can spend more time on the things that take me thinking or creating and all of that. But one of the things that came up in the ethical conversation I had earlier is what do we do about those people who are tab A and slot A type workers? These who do the same task over and over and over, and it can get automated.
Well, and they love it.
Yeah, and they love it. That's what. Yeah, and um, but if we start eliminating that job, what's the employer's responsibility? If I know, and we're going to implement this system, and as we train this system, we'll be able to eliminate 3 of these HR admin jobs, let's say. What's the employer's responsibility? What would you tell an employer? What would you think at in your organization? What's your responsibility about preparing those people? Or
Well, I think it's a conversation that you start with before you even decide to go in that direction, right? Like, what is the end goal here? Are we wanting to cut labor? Are we wanting to, go more AI driven? Or, like, is this something where we can go that direction, but then hang on to that person and upskill them? Is there a way to put them in another role that they would still be successful at? That we wouldn't need replacement. Beyond that, I mean, that's a really tough conversation. I know what Kirby Lane would do. I mean, we would upskill. We're big on that, right? So we would make sure that this person continues to have a job and continues to be part of our family. So I think the human aspect of it for us is always still going to come into consideration.
and y'all, I would guess, just like so many restaurants that I know here in Fort Worth, and so many other organizations that hire like that frontline labor, are I'm guessing y'all are probably have the same problem. You're struggling to get enough people who want to do that job, and so it may be that we can free people up from ordering supplies or doing other things and put them into direct customer service roles, or if that's what they're built for. Um, and I think that the training and planning ahead is going to be really key. It's people running out, and early adopters just jump on stuff and don't ever always think through the process. And so maybe we'll learn more from how other companies kind of fumble that ball. But on the y'all's main delivery is on the food side, but y'all, like any other company, you've got accounting, HR, and property management. I imagine that's a big part of your stuff. So there's going to be stuff that we need to take care of, and I think employers ignoring it is they're gonna end up uncompetitive.
Well, it's not going away,
Right.
right? Like, I don't view this as something that is going to be a fad or it's going to come in for, a year or 2 years and only certain industries or people are going to consider it. I do think it is something that is going to continue to grow with time. And so you've got to start thinking about, how does it impact me? How do we use it? How do we not use it? What's our, considerations around it? Are there threats from it? So I think, we're going to have to continue to have that conversation and see what continues to come out. I mean, I can think of a ton, in my time. I've been at Kirby Lane 17 years. It's crazy. They hired me when I was 12, I promise. But I've been there so long. And in just that amount of time, to see the amount of changes in technology, in restaurant technology, it blows my mind, right? And whether it's anything from like building and maintenance to, managing all of our vendors. And, we are at the point now where if we have a piece of equipment that needs servicing, literally we just scan a barcode and that does everything for us. It sends it over to the vendor that's already in the system, and they know that they're coming, and we get an email when they'll be there.
Yeah, and so that's 15 minutes or an hour of labor just saved right there. And I think that's the thing is AI is just another kind of technology, and I think that's you know people wouldn't be freaking out if we described it that way. Yeah, well, this is this. You scan this barcode, and it contacts the vendor, and they know that they're good. But when we call it artificial intelligence, and again, we've all seen Terminator, and we've seen all these things, and we just assume it's going to be the end of the world. But just like the the automobile, put buggy whip makers, out of business. There's going to be change, and there's going to be upheaval, and hopefully, as business leaders, we figure out ways to help plan for that, help people prepare for it. I don't have high anticipation that the government's going to do a good job of that. I'm on the workforce development board here in Tarrant County. I've got a lot of faith that public-private partnerships might work and preparing for some of that. But I think the rate of pace, the pace of change is so fast now that we may not be. Some companies may be caught flat-footed, or some employees may be caught flat-footed when that happens. But we'll see. So it's a fun topic, and I think here of the probably 200 people I spoke to in my two sessions, there were a lot of people just shocked by what you could do. Generating drafts, not final editions, but drafts of employment paperwork or offer letters or job descriptions and job postings. But people were surprised by that. But I think there are tools that are there, and people are going to have to. If we're going to be competitive, we got to figure out how to embrace them and still be humane, keep the
Yeah,
human in resources.
I agree with that.
So I've got a friend here in the DFW area who took her restaurant to completely carry out and catering only because she couldn't hire employees, frontline workers. And we've talked about it recently on another episode about the challenges of hiring frontline workers. But the there was a survey done by Gartner that said half of candidates have accepted a job and then reneged on it, and that's in the last year and a half, I think it was. So, and I'm hearing that from all the time. They're getting ghosted by applicants. Employers say, we made the offer. Did that number that number of 0.5, did that surprise you?
It didn't surprise me. It did. I mean, I think that we're seeing the same trend, right? Where, well, again, part of the reason why we're trying to streamline the process is that we do have people that don't show up for the interviews, or that accept the job and then don't come in for the orientation or the first day of training. And what we've really tried to push to our team is that it's not it needs to be the quickest process possible for that person. And it also needs to be, they need to be meeting who is their supervisor. You got to try to get them as engaged as possible, as soon as possible, in my opinion. And then it's not just about that first, day. It's about that first 2 weeks. It's about that first 30 days. How do you make them feel special? How do you make them feel like this is their place so that they don't then disappear?
What does that look like at Kirby Lane? How do you onboard somebody so that they really feel like a Kirby Laner? Or what, do y'all have a term? Do you have a term for a team member like that, or
Kirby Laner. I mean, I'm like just a curbster,
a curb?
a
Oh, okay.
curbster. But basically, I mean, they meet their manager right away, right? And then we've got things that we do to keep them engaged. And so some of that is just like, hey, how do you like to be rewarded? Because I think some people really enjoy the outward, like, you did a great job today. And some people prefer it written. And some people really just don't need to know. And so it's really about fine tuning kind of that onboarding process for them and them coming into the system. And then they tell us, what's your favorite stuff? When it's your birthday, do you want a cake? Do you not want to talk about your birthday?
Hmm.
Do you want a card, right? Service anniversaries is the same thing. What would be a valuable service anniversary gift to you? So we really try to take it and make it as personal per person as possible. And so we're doing that from day one. And that's everything from asking them, what's your favorite foods, to what do you hate? What kind of rewards do you like? And we also do a lot of mentoring within Kirby Lane. So they all get assigned to kind of what is a social group, really, so that they can then make friends with their coworkers. Because again, it's really just their own little internal networking program so that they can make friends and stick around and not leave. And I think we've had really great success with that. We've got basically, if we can get them to stay for longer than 90 days, they typically stay 18 months. But we've got to get to that 90-day
That
first.
service industry, that's a big number
It
too.
is a big number, and I'm proud of us. The team works really, really hard. I'm not the one in the restaurant every day, so it's really just about giving them the tools and supporting them and teaching them how to get their team members engaged.
Okay, you're collecting things, talking to them about what their favorite food is or how they like to be incentivized or rewarded, recognized. Is that a database that HR is keeping, or is that something that that their direct supervisor is keeping track of? How do you formalize
It's
that?
a database that they all add to.
Really?
Uh-huh. And because the other thing is we allow team members to work at multiple locations. So your home store might be, South Lamar, store number 2, but you might also pick up shifts at store number 4, which is UT, right? So when you're at that location, or if you transfer to that location, how do they know what you need?
Wow. So you've built that whole system, and I'm gonna give you all the credit.
I did personally,
Yeah,
just me with AI.
yeah,
I
yeah.
did it.
Well, but I mean that's a callback, but that is something that AI obviously could really help. You're getting this person, and here's these data points that have come in, and here's what you need to know because this person's showing up to this morning at 9 o'clock to fill this shift. I can see where something like AI that can abstract that data quickly and make it sense to a shift manager would be valuable. But you're collecting all that data. That's really interesting because that's a real deep, granular level of data to keep about your employees. Where, I mean, quite honestly, in corporate America, there are a lot of frontline supervisors who don't know whether this employee is married or not.
Right.
That's really interesting. And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, premium background checks with fast and friendly service. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 3/4 of a recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Research Credits. Then select episode 119 and enter the keyword Kirby. That's KERBEY. And if you're looking for even more recertification credit, check out the webinars page at imperativeinfo.com. And now back to my conversation with Rose Ann Garza. So that's after you get them on board.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing on the side about just they've accepted the offer? How do you keep them engaged till their start date? I would guess that on the restaurant side, they're pretty, they're not giving 2 weeks notice usually or something like that. But how do you keep them engaged, even on the corporate side or whatever, before they get on board so that they don't accept? Because the Indeed thing said that they were getting other job offers, or they just decided it wasn't a work-life balance, which is I'm getting really tired of hearing about. But they just got cold feet, basically. What are you doing to keep them engaged before they even start?
Well, I think for us, it's, from the beginning, if you're hired, you can most likely start tomorrow if you want to start tomorrow, if you're in one of the restaurants. When you're in our office, we're seeing that same problem, right? We recently were hiring for an accounts payable position, and that was one of those things where we had to kind of light a fire, and I did all the back end work, but then I had that hiring manager, the person whoever's going to supervise that, they did all of the legwork. And so from the get-go, every candidate was meeting whoever their boss was. They weren't going through me. And that was our way to try to streamline it so that they're like, okay, well, I've met you and I like you, and we've gone through this process together, instead of saying, okay, well, I've gone through 1 or 2 rounds of interviews with HR, or I've had a phone call with HR, and now I'm going to go meet my boss, and we're not going to work. I don't like that person. And so we really try to like introduce that person as soon as possible and hire them, as quickly as we can. And what we honestly found was interesting. We tried to bring a lot of our office in, and specifically with this role, we were like, okay, whoever we hire in this new AP role is going to be in the office. And we very quickly learned we got to pivot.
Hmm.
That's not going to work. So we're doing an 80-20, right? And so I think we're seeing candidates still have a lot of control over what it is that they perceive to be of value, and we're doing our best to try to meet them there.
Yeah, and I'm still seeing, I think, too many. I mean, we've proven that remote or at least hybrid is doable, and I'm still seeing a lot of employers who didn't, and I know you, so I know there's good performance management around how everything gets done, but managers who manage by walking around, which is an 80s term that didn't mean what it meant manage by knowing what's going on with your employees on a regular basis and staying in contact. And it didn't mean be looking over their shoulders, but most managers who think they're managing by walking around thought it meant just, look busy, make sure everybody looks busy. And so, but those organizations, I think, are still trying to drag people back because either they don't have the productivity or they don't have a sense that they're productive because they don't have good measurements. And so trying to get people to come back in, they're struggling. And there are people, I mean, I think you're seeing young people want to come back in the office.
Right.
They're realizing they need the mentorship or they want the relationships and things like that. And there's probably a better argument if I'm early in my career that I need that and that I need to be around that. But if I'm an accounts, an accounting person at some level in the organization, I've been there for a long time, it's probably easier for me to be in 20%, out 80%. Did I do that math right? Okay, see, I could be an accounting person. I can do math. 80 and 20 is 100. So
I feel like I just saw Rain Man. That was like a moment,
exactly.
a flash.
Yeah. And so anytime if it's got numbers attached, that I'm usually in trouble. But so we're getting to that point where I think some organizations are just saying, you've got to come in, and like you said, y'all had to pivot, which is kind of interesting because I wouldn't. Accounts payable is not a job that I would have thought would be easily done remote. Somebody's got to get those documents in. I'm sure you still get a lot of junk in the mail and bills in the mail and a lot of paper, so that's got to get processed. So what was your process in deciding we're going to have to go hybrid, and here's how we're going to do that job?
Well, I think again, right, we're talking about technology, right? I know we've moved on from that topic, but it's still coming up. And the sense of, we're 10 locations kind of spread out through all of Central Texas. And so having those invoices be a physical piece of paper, that was something that we had to come to terms with years ago, that wasn't the best system. And so we had kind of already set it up that an AP, person could be remote. that wasn't the goal. The
You went
goal,
paperless at
right?
some
The
point.
goal was to go paperless, and then that made their job that much easier, and all the systems that are in place. So the 20% when they're in, they're printing physical checks. That's why they're there. Otherwise, the rest of the job can be done remotely, and their supervisor can check it all remotely because it's all within this one system and program. So the reason they come down is literally to pick up whatever physical, mail has come in, and to print physical checks to mail out. That's it.
So they pick up the physical mail and take it back home if they and scan it there into
Mhm,
your document management system.
mhm.
Yeah.
But we don't
So
get a ton of bills through the mail either because years ago we said, "Hey, we wanna go paperless. We wanna go ACH in paying as many of our bills as possible to also cut down on that so that that person can do other, tasks."
yeah. So that's and we went paperless in 2010. I think 2009 Great Recession came along. And like it happened 2 weeks after I spent an ungodly amount of money on a document management system and said that I sat on this, that sat on a server and we did nothing with for a good bit of time. But now, I mean, if and my employees at that time were not thrilled with the going paperless and it was too much work, they wouldn't go back. I mean,
Yeah.
within after we had fully implemented it by the end of 2012. Uh, it would have been it saved way too much labor to go back, but and it's amazing that you can every email that's ever come through our server is on that. I can
Mhm.
always go find something or a document or a bill or whatever. And more vendors are emailing invoices or and directly to an accounts payable email that nobody has to actually look at till it's in the system. So there's it's interesting that y'all were able to do that. And I think that's on the recruiting side, it's just going to be really key to figure out what your candidates want and where they are in their career and what they do. Am I going to have the mentorship opportunities?
Right.
And if I'm sitting in my living room 80% of the time, maybe I feel like I'm not going to get those mentorship opportunities. But it's
Well,
just
and some
figuring
people don't want them.
right. Yeah, some people, I just want to do this job, and God bless them. I'm glad for those people because you know I need people I need to train analysts to do background checks all day, and it's time consuming, tedious training, and if everybody wanted to, do something bigger and different, it would be outrageously expensive to do what we do.
Yep.
And so I need trained people, and so I'm glad, and we compensate them fairly, and we make sure that we do everything like you, that to incentivize them to stay, to be happy, to grow in however they want to grow. But it's pretty challenging. So, are you seeing that 50%? Are you seeing a 50% no show rate on offers?
I would say on
Yeah,
offers,
if you've made an offer,
no, I wouldn't say it's that high for us after offers. Again, we're trying to turn them around and literally the next day. So I think for us, it's really the pain point is the interview process. And we're definitely seeing, we're being ghosted sometimes upwards of 75%.
what do you attribute that to?
They got another job. That's really what I mean, because if you agree to an interview and then you don't come in, we didn't do anything different. We didn't do
Right.
anything wrong. We didn't have any further communication with you. So it's a choice that something changed in on their side.
Yeah, and I think the idea that what happens too often is that employers drag that interview process out. And if you're not following up with the applicant, I mean, it used to be the applicant's supposed to follow up with the employer with a handwritten thank you note after the interview. Those days have changed. I mean, if you do that, I tell every applicant, everybody I know, especially young job seekers, do that. You write a handwritten note, nobody's ever seen one before, and they will remember you. You'll stand out a little bit. But I think employers need to start doing something along that lines too. Like, hey, thanks for the interview. Here's what our process is from here. And this is a commitment that I'm willing to make as whether the recruiter, the hiring manager, whatever. I will follow up with you by this date and actually do it.
Well, I think on our end, right, the question really is how long has that application sat there? Because, and we've looked at this kind of reporting prior to the last couple of years, a person could apply and they reasonably expected that you would get back to them in 2 to 3 days. Now they're expecting within 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So if you haven't responded to them within 24 hours and acknowledge that you've received their application and that you're interested, they take that as you're not interested. So I'm moving on and I'm applying for a ton more jobs, which so then if we're coming back 2 or 3 days later and we're reaching out and setting up an interview, they might say yes, but they might have already interviewed with someone else. And so they're
Right.
really just kind of going through the motions with us.
Yeah, they're further in somebody
Mhm.
else's pipeline now, and whoever gets across that finish line first is going to get the offer. Now, hopefully, they stick with that offer, but can you blame them if they get a better offer?
No,
Or, if they accepted a job at some substandard restaurant in Austin and now Kirby Lane wants them, of course
I'm on.
they're
Yeah.
gonna say, okay, well that's a good opportunity, and they're gonna renege on, renege is probably that's the term they used in the article. I think that overstates it. I mean, renege sounds like they're being dishonest, and I don't see that. They're doing what's in their best interest, and that's what I would ask for anybody who came to work for me. That's what I would expect for them. And
Well, and I still think it's their market,
right.
right? Like they are in demand. And so they're going to go where they perceive to be the best fit, the greatest offer, and where they possibly might stay longer. And so if they, showed up for us and then they disappeared, we can only assume someone beat us out.
And that's one of the sessions here at HR Southwest was talking about the demographics of Texas and the U.S. We are not replacing entry level workers at the rate we need to be, and so there's even if we think the economy is slowing down, and maybe the quit rate is going down, things like that. I still don't think we're going to. It's going to be an employee market, or it's going to be a pro labor market for quite a while. And we got to do some serious stuff around immigration reform or something else, or start having a whole lot of babies, and I'm done with that.
Count me out.
Yeah, so I don't see us having solving that problem. So it's going to be we need to start looking at the labor shortage, especially on frontline workers, entry level jobs, things like that, especially as the reality. This is not a temporary thing. And post COVID, the economy is sorting out. I mean, I'm guilty of saying that a couple of years ago, but now as we look at it and you compare the demographics, this is the reality. And so
Mhm.
we're going to need AI to take some of the burden off some of those jobs, but we got to figure out how to be as employers. How are we the employer of choice to get in? 10 years ago, a lot of companies weren't thinking about being employer of choice for entry level jobs. I want to attract these white collar, these high skill, high experience candidates. But now, if there's not somebody, whether to unlock the doors first thing in the morning, or to greet customers as they walk in the lobby, or do whatever needs to be done, make your deliveries, those things. If there's not somebody to do that, you're out of business. So one last topic, the and I like this is benefitnews.com, but the no more crying at work, how to prevent a toxic workplace. And I just, it's the old Tom Hanks. There's no crying in baseball, but 1 in 5 workers have experienced harm to their mental health at work. And that's according to the American Psychological Association. So 20% of people have experienced harm to their mental health at work. My first question whenever I read something like that is, of that 20%, how many were already had some mental harm? I mean, how many of them were, were going to be whatever you asked them to do was going to, whatever environment you put them in, they were still going to feel like, they weren't, like it wasn't a healthy environment, because for
Right.
them, there may not be. But so having said that, and that's almost me being the grumpy old man, get off my yard, thing. But that's up. 22% have experienced harassment in the workplace, and that's up from 14%. So we're going the wrong direction on that. What do you attribute that to? I mean, and I think it's not talking about sexual harassment, but I think it's probably just that harassment where I have some disagreement with somebody that goes beyond professional and courteous, I guess, is maybe.
Well, I think that the social norms of what is okay in like in employment and at your job have drastically changed, just in the last probably 4 to 5 years. I think the expectation is that now, you need to be sensitive to any and all needs, and it's really hard to meet people with those needs, and especially if you don't know them. And so I think my question is, what are we measuring here, right? Like, what is the causing, what are these triggers, what is the cause, what's making a person feel that way? The other thing you talked about, well, was this person already possibly had something going on in their life?
Right.
Everyone has something going on in their life.
Right.
So the question is, right, as an employer, in my opinion, the question is, as an employer, how are you helping that person to be the most well-rounded, best version of themselves, right? So I talk about things like EAP, right? Do you have one? Does your team know about it? Do they utilize it? Um, I think a huge thing for us has been childcare. So much, one of the biggest shifts that we've seen in the restaurant is we went from having a 50-50 split, 50% male, 50% female workforce, to having a significantly higher female workforce now.
What do you? Well, that's interesting.
It is
What
very
What do you
interesting.
think causes that?
I think that the traditionally male, specifically for back of house for us, which means your kitchen, I think that they have left a lot of those cook jobs and restaurant jobs, and that they're doing apprenticeships. I think they're doing construction, electrical, HVAC. They're possibly moving in that direction instead of being a cook. Um, and I think more women are in the workforce than ever because I think it's more expensive than ever.
Right.
I look at Austin alone, cost of living is 7.5% in
It's
1 year.
nuts. Yeah.
So they can't afford to be at home. They have to work. And so I think those shifts have really impacted people's needs. And so that's why one of the things we looked at is, how do we help them with childcare? How do we help them with, if they need to have daycare stipends? And, what can we do to take some of those outside stressors off of them so that when they come to work, they can focus on work?
And I wonder if that feeling, that harassment is up. I mean, our whole society
Is
seems
more
like in the
aware.
last 6 years, well, we're also a lot less civil
Oh, yeah.
to each other, and I wonder how much of it is just our social zeitgeist is kind of has changed, and everybody is so entrenched in their own position, their own identity about whatever, and if you disagree with me in this position or this way I live or whatever, then there's something wrong with you. And so if I'm this traditional belief of whatever, and you're all in my face about your less traditional, different thing, I'm going to take this personally, and you're causing me some sort of mental harm. And we see that in our politics, we see it in God help us, social media, and so I wonder how much of it is attributable to that. But like you say, as an employer, it won't work if we just say, can we all just get along? I mean, that used to be the way we would approach it. But like you said, EAPs. But I think training managers in conflict resolution, and that there's a whole bunch of here at HRSouthwest. There are a lot of conversations around that in different sessions. And how do we train we don't train managers. First of all, that's our biggest problem. Sure, Kirby Lane does, but somebody is really good at this job, so we're going to put them in charge of other people who do this job, and we don't train them how to do conflict
Right.
management, how to coach, and all that. So I think maybe that's part of the issue too. And I'm sure in your industry, it's probably the norm. I think a lot of, and I'm sure there in a lot of the hospitality industry, there are a lot of supervisors who they're the ones who would take the job, or they're the ones who are available, or something like that. So how do y'all avoid that if I want to make somebody a real leader, not just somebody who's filling out the timesheets or
Right.
setting a calendar?
Well, I think there's a couple ways that we try to tackle that. I think one of those is we do train them, right? We have a lot of empathy training, a lot of from one role to the next role type training when you get a promotion, because especially with us, I would say, I mean, I don't have the, statistic today, but somewhere in the high 80s, low 90s, our management teams are promoted from within. So this is a person who came in as a host, a busser, a cook, a server, and they've stayed with the company and they've kind of worked their way up. I can definitely tell you every single managing partner of all 10 locations all started at Kirby Lane. We didn't hire them outside. We haven't had great success with that. That's honestly been one of our weaker points, I think, is bringing an outside person in and them being successful in a higher ranking management role. And I think it's because when we promote from within, they're really learning the culture of who we are, and they're getting a really great understanding of what we will and we won't put up with, right? And one of our unspoken core values is, I don't know if I can cuss on here, but I'm about to.
Go.
No assholes.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. If you are one, you're gonna stick out. It's not gonna work out, because that's the culture that we have built. One of the things that I'm struggling with, right, is as we grow, how do we maintain that? And so that's, why I come to conferences like this
Right.
to figure out those sorts of how do I maintain our culture and make sure that we're training and keeping, great leadership and our core values with that while we grow without losing ourselves.
And y'all are Central Texas, San Antonio to Austin, and that reach Round Rock to, and so what will you? I mean, that's interesting because, I'm dying for there to be a Kirby Lane in Fort Worth. Hint, hint. But that would create a challenge, right? To fully staff a
Oh,
restaurant.
we already felt that. I mean, we opened San Antonio last year, and that was the furthest one away from kind of our hub of where everyone's at. And we thought, okay, we'll take an existing managing partner that wants to go down there. We'll relocate him and his family, and we'll be okay because he's the managing partner and he gets it and he's tried and he's true. And he did a great job, but he didn't have the team. And we've really seen that store struggle.
Interesting.
And so we're a little over a year into it, and we've had to bring in more existing people. And so, like, I'm sitting here today very humbly saying it's something we are still working on, because when you're that far away and you're hiring that many from outside of the company, we've lost some of that who we are culture. And we've seen our turnover at that location be more than double than all the others.
Wow. So that's the impact of culture right there, then,
Mhm.
right? And so how do we grow? How do we duplicate what we've already done at these other locations, at this new location in a new market where just bringing in one leader is not enough?
Right.
Wow.
And so
Interesting.
we're basically trying to be there as much as possible, whether it's an area director, whether it's, our culinary director, our ops team, our training teams, we're trying to get them down there as much as possible to try to get that store where we'd like it to be culturally.
Interesting. So
And it's not bad,
no,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah. If you're in San Antonio and you
it's
want to work in
great.
a really great
The food's
restaurant,
delicious.
yeah, yeah.
It's just, it's culturally, we have a longer road culturally to go there.
Interesting. Wow. Well, you know what? We're out of time. So, and it is the end of the day on day 2 of HR Southwest, and Whiskey and Rye is right across the street. So it's time to go be adults for a little while. So, but thank you, Rose Ann, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. You can comment on this episode or search our previous episodes at goodmorninghr.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. And don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcast. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and you can reach him at robmakespods.com. And thank you to Imperative's marketing coordinator, Marianne Hernandez, who keeps the trains running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.